welcome to Pay It Forward. Today we're going to be making this gorgeous little owl bunting. You can see that I have that strung up there on my little shelving unit. It's absolutely perfect for babies' nurseries, children's rooms. All you'll need to do is click on the link in the description below and you can download your free pattern sheet, get that one printed out, and then I'll show you how it's done. Here are the things that you're going to need to make your little owl bunting. Now I'm going to be demonstrating on just one little owl today, and I'm going to add to my little string of owls that I already have. So I have one little sample made up here for you to see. So what we begin with, you'll find that you'll need a full pattern piece that is the full back. Now that one is cut out of felt and has fusible webbing, heat and bond applied to the back. We leave that paper on. The second piece is exactly the same, except that it's cut from what I call felt fabric, and that's simply felt, a piece of felt and a fabric joined together with some heat and bond. And I do that on a little two pieces of fabric, and then I press them together, then I cut my shape out from that. So those are exactly the same piece. And then we will need your little face piece, which has fusible webbing applied. That one I cut out in felt. Then you need just a body filler, which is just a piece of ordinary felt, just a scrap of felt. Mine's actually interfaced, but it doesn't need to be. It just gives it a little bit of substance. And then you'll need your tail piece. Now this little tail piece is cut from double felt, which is two pieces of felt joined together with fusible webbing. And then you'll need your little inner tail piece, which is just the little decorative part, and that one has fusible webbing behind as well. You will also need your two little feet, which I've cut out in felt, and they have the fusible webbing on behind, and they are just those two little heart shapes. You can also add, this is where you can add little things yourself. I have little printed words that I printed on my computer, and on all of my little owls I've put the little word joy just there, and that's on a little piece that has heat and bond behind it as well, and that will just press on. So you can add any kind of little embellishment that you like there, maybe just an extra decorative button or something like that. You'll also need two buttons for eyes. You can see there I like to use 2 hole buttons because we get a nice little sort of a slit pupil there when we stitch it in that dark thread. So those two there, and you will need a tiny, I'm using a tiny little button, heart button for the beak there. I've also supplied you with a little template for a little, to cut out a beak in felt with the heat and bond behind it if you don't have a tiny little button like that. But I think that the little heart-shaped buttons work very well for a tiny beak. You'll also need just a little button to attach the little tail from behind, something that coordinates. And then the way that I join mine together, there's several ways that you can join all of your bunting together. Obviously you could just thread them all together and join them that way. You could put a strip of ribbon behind them all and connect them up that way. I find just by using just a slightly larger jump ring, I just pop them straight through the ends of their little wings there, and then they connect up beautifully, and then they're quite close to each other too, and it really does give it quite a little professional finish. So I have a few there, and I'll be adding these two onto my existing little strand of owls. So to begin with, our first step, we're going to press on to our front. We'll leave this one there for a guide. Press onto our front, remove our backing paper of course, and we'll use an iron and a protective cloth to press on our little feet. You can see, you need to remember when you're positioning these that we're going to be sewing around the entire outside of our little owl. So you want to leave room for that. And so they just sit up. I like to just tilt them out just a fraction. Press those in place, and also check where your little face, we're not pressing that on right now, but check where your little face is. And then any other little embellishments you've got, you just press that one on now too. And then we'll be able to stitch those on. So now I have those pressed into place there, and all I'm going to do is take it to my machine, and I'm going to just stitch around those little those little shapes just in a contrasting, or perhaps you want a matching thread, just around to settle those in place. And on the little feet there, you can see that what I've done is I've just stitched in a little Y shape just to create the look of a little foot, and it'll hold that little heart shape in place. And I've actually gone over that stitching 2 times on the machine. So you can see there that I've just stitched those little pieces in place, and you can see that little Y shape there to make those little feet. Next step is just to press, taking the backing fabric off of that little piece, and we're going to just press that little face shape on. Our next step is to mark in little places for our little eyes and our beak. If you're using a little button for the beak, as I am, if you're using your little piece of felt to make your beak, you would now press that one on in place and then do your stitching around it just as you did here. Because I'm using a little button, I've just marked in place where I want that little beak to sit. It's actually about 2.5 centimetres from the very centre top of the head, and then just make sure that your little eyes are placed the same distance either side, and it actually looks very, very sweet and very young if the little beak is sitting up almost right, and only just sits a little lower than the just a tiny bit lower than the eyes. Now when I stitch those little eyes on, I'm going to have the buttons, the holes going up and down, so that once I stitch that on I'm using a black Gutermann top stitch thread, I'm going to get that nice little sort of eye slit. You can of course use 4 button eyes. Just make sure that when you sew them on, that you sew them on over in a little cross shape, so that you really get the look of a little pupil. And for sewing on my little beak, I'm just going to be using a colour that blends with the button there. Our little buttons are all stitched in place, and so now we're going to put this little body together. So we're just going to remove the backing paper from at the back of our body, and we're going to need just some clear craft glue here, and it's quick drying and it's made for fabric, so any clear craft and hobby glue. We're going to take our little filler and just apply a little bit of glue, and it is the large end goes to the top of the head, and all we have to do is place that in a way that gives us just enough room to be able to stitch around the entire outside. You can see that there, I've left enough room here, and then we're going to do the same with our little constructed owl front, making sure that we get all those little edges. We are going to be sewing this one around, so it's really just to hold it in place for you. But if we can get those edges just pressed down nicely, just makes the job easier. You can use your little wonder clips too if you have them, to just hold those pieces together. So it's really just a matter of lining all your edges up. Craft glue is good because you can move it around a little. You can see there, I'm just going to press those all together. You find they'll hold pretty well. And then we're just going to leave that little one just to dry for a few minutes, and we will get prepared with the tail. So our next step is to take our little tail piece, remove our backing paper, and we're going to press on that little inner tail piece just right there, right in the centre. You'll see it fits nicely. Press that one into place with a hot iron and a protective cloth. So there I have pressed on my little inner tail piece, and you can see that I have stitched just right round close to the edge of that little shape there. So we can put that little one aside, and now our little owl body is all nicely dried. We're just going to do our machine stitching. You can see the way that I have done that on this one here. Now first of all, we just do a top stitch around all of the layers, just around the head section, and then we go on and we do exactly the same thing, and we go around the entire body, starting from the shoulder here all the way right around back to the top of the other shoulder. By doing them separately, it just means that we get that little face piece is nicely separated. And you can use a contrasting thread. Now the other alternative, of course, is you could do a blanket stitch all the way around if you had time and you wanted to really put some work into these. I'm doing it this way because it's nice and quick, and because you're making quite a few of them, I find it easy to do on the machine. So there is my little owl all stitched up, and he's all ready to have his tail added. Now before we do that, I'm just going to show you this little one so you can see that you could go ahead and blanket stitch that little edge if you prefer that look and if you have the time. And if you like this little owl shape, I actually have a video for this little owl. It's the same, basically the same little pattern, only I show you how to make him into a little keyring, which is really sweet, so check that out as well. So now we're going to add his little tail, so we're just going to turn him over and we're going to add that tail. I have a doubled thread of extra strong upholstery thread. I'm just going to attach this little tail with my button, because we're not just going to sew that button on, because that will show us stitching through here. So that way that we're going to do it is it sits very low here, and our little button just sits right at the top there of that little tail. So I don't have a knot in the end of my double thread, and we're just going to go through the buttonhole, and then we're going to take a stitch just across the bottom there, just quite low down across, but not going through all the layers so nothing shows at the front there. We're going to come through, and then we're going to come back through the little tail section, through the other hole, and then I can take my needle off and pull those all together, and you can see that all I need to do is tie a double knot nice and firm, and that will keep that little tail in place. And so my final step is just to add my little jump rings. And you can see I've added that little one there. It's a simple matter of, I've got my awl here, and I've just made just a little hole through all of those layers, and it's because this is all quite strong, and just push it right the way to the end of the awl, and you've got a nice clear hole there, and you can just slip your little jump ring through. And then we're just going to close that one up. You can use your pliers. I generally just use my little forceps. Close those little ones up, and then I can join him onto his little friend who's already got his little rings in place. Close that one up. And then I can add those two to my existing little string of Owl Bunting. So it's growing, it's getting longer all the time. And so there is our completed bunting. I've added those two to my string already. You can see they look fabulous, hung up over a bookcase in a nursery, a child's room, just absolutely beautiful. And remember them for craft markets and baby fairs. I think you'll find they'll be very successful, and as you can see, they're very, very quick to make. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, you could give me a thumbs up. That would be absolutely beaut. Remember to pay all of the good things forward, and until our next video together, it's hooroo from me.